The stars had never looked so close before. Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the small window of the exploration ship Pioneer and watched the distant suns shimmer like diamonds on black silk. After 6 months of travel, she still could not believe they had made it this far from Earth. The Pioneer was not much to look at. Its hull was patched with metal plates welded together by hand. The fusion drive sputtered and coughed like an old car on a cold morning. Inside, pipes dripped condensation, and the air recycler made grinding noises that kept everyone awake at night. But it was humanity's first real starship, and Elena loved every creaking bolt of it. "Captain," called out Navigator Tom Chun from his station, "we're picking up something strange on the sensors." Elena floated over to look at the screen. 3 large objects were moving toward them, too big and too fast to be asteroids. "How big are we talking, Tom?" "Each one is about 5 times the size of our ship." And Captain Tom's voice got quiet. "They're not natural. These are ships." Elena felt her heart start beating faster. For 200 years, humans had looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone. Now they had their answer. "Send a message on all frequencies," Elena ordered. "Tell them we come in peace and want to talk." The reply came back in perfect English, though the voice sounded strange, like someone speaking through water. "Small vessel, you will stop your engines and prepare to be examined." Elena looked around at her crew of 12. They were all staring at her, waiting for orders. She had trained for this moment her whole life, but nothing could have prepared her for how real it felt. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of Earth Vessel Pioneer," she broadcast back. "We are explorers from the planet Earth. We would like to meet you in peace." The alien ships moved closer. Elena could see them clearly now through the window. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to glow with their own light. No welding marks, no patches, no visible engines or weapons, but they moved through space like sharks through water. "Earth vessel," came the alien voice again, and this time Elena could hear something that sounded like amusement. "You will be examined. Do not resist." A beam of light shot out from the lead alien ship and wrapped around the Pioneer. Elena felt the ship shake as the aliens took control of their engines. They were being pulled toward the alien vessel like a fish on a hook. "Captain," said Engineer Sarah Kim, her hands flying over her control panel, "they've locked onto our systems. I can't break us free." Inside the alien ship, the Pioneer looked even smaller than it was. Elena and her crew found themselves in a massive hangar filled with technology they could not understand. Lights pulsed in patterns that hurt their eyes. The air smelled like electricity and flowers. A door opened, and 3 aliens walked out. They looked almost human, but their skin was blue-green, and their eyes were too large. They wore clothes that seemed to be made of liquid metal. When they moved, they seemed to float rather than walk. The leader stepped forward. "I am Commander Vexhar of the Zephyrian Confederation. You are primitive beings from a primitive world. Your ship is held together with..." He paused and consulted a device that translated for him. ... tape and hope. Elena heard some of her crew gasp at the insult, but she kept her face calm. "We may be primitive, Commander, but we've traveled between the stars. That has to count for something." Vexhar made a sound that Elena realized was laughter. Behind him, other aliens had gathered to look at the humans. They were all laughing now, pointing at the Pioneer and making jokes in their strange language. "You call this traveling between stars?" Vexhar gestured at the Pioneer. "Your ship moves like a sick animal. Your technology is so backward that we thought you were broadcasting by accident when we first heard your signals. We had to check our instruments twice to make sure intelligent beings had actually built this thing." Elena felt her anger rising. but she forced herself to stay calm. "What do you want from us, Commander?" "Want?" Vexhar looked surprised. "We do not want anything from you. We are here to inform you of new realities. Your world, this Earth, is now part of the Zephyrian Confederation. Your people will work for us. Your resources will belong to us. Your primitive species will serve more advanced beings, as is proper. And if we refuse?" Elena asked. The laughter stopped. Vexhar's large eyes grew cold. "Refuse? Small human, you do not understand. We have conquered 47 worlds. We have fleets of 10,000 ships. We have weapons that can crack planets like eggs. Your entire world has perhaps a dozen ships like this pathetic craft. What could you possibly do to refuse us?" Elena looked at her crew. They were scared. She could see it in their faces. But they were also angry. Humans did not like being told they were worthless. "We could ask you to leave us alone," Elena said quietly. This brought more laughter from the aliens. Vexhar wiped his eyes as if he had been crying from laughing so hard. "Leave you alone? Oh, little human, you are very funny. We will share this recording with the entire Confederation. Everyone will want to see the primitive species that thinks it can negotiate with their superiors." Vexhar touched a device on his wrist, and Elena knew he was recording everything. She could see other aliens pointing smaller devices at them, capturing images and sounds to share with others. "Here is what will happen," Vexhar continued. "You will return to your world. You will tell your leaders that the Zephyrian Confederation now owns Earth. You have 72 of your hours to surrender completely. After that, we will come with correction fleets to teach you proper behavior." "Correction fleets?" Elena asked. "Ships, designed to remind disobedient species of their place in the universe," Vexhar explained casually. "Usually 30 or 40 vessels are enough to convince primitives to cooperate. In your case, perhaps we will only need 20. Your technology is so backward that it would hardly be fair to use more." Elena felt something burning in her chest. It was not fear. It was determination. "And if we surrender? What happens to our people? They will work in mines and factories. They will grow food for more advanced species. Their children will be taught to serve properly. It is a good life for primitives who know their place." Elena nodded slowly. "I see. And you're certain that Earth will surrender?" "Of course," Vexhar said, looking puzzled. "What else could you do? We have shown you our power. We have shown you your weakness. Only fools fight when they cannot win." Elena looked around the alien hangar one more time, memorizing everything. She could see the weapons, the technology, the way the aliens moved and talked. She looked at her crew and saw they were doing the same thing. "Commander Vexhar," Elena said formally, "I will deliver your message to Earth, but I want you to know something. Humans have a saying, never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose." Vexhar waved a hand dismissively. "Empty words from a primitive mind. Take your broken ship and go. We will see you again soon, and then you will learn what real power looks like." As the Pioneer was released back into space, Elena gathered her crew around her. They were quiet, but she could see the fire in their eyes. "Tom, set course for Earth. Maximum speed." "Captain," said Sarah quietly, "what are we going to do?" "They're right about one thing. We can't fight them with what we have." Elena looked out at the alien ships growing smaller behind them. "Maybe not with what we have now, Sarah, but humans have always been good at learning from their mistakes. And these aliens just made a very big mistake." "What mistake is that, Captain?" Elena smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "They showed us exactly what they can do, and they think we're too stupid to figure out how they do it." The Pioneer limped toward Earth, carrying news that would change everything. Behind them, The Zephyrian ships watched them go, still laughing at the primitive humans and their ridiculous ship held together with metal patches and desperate hope. They had no idea what was coming. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been going for 18 hours straight. President Maria Santos rubbed her tired eyes as she listened to another report from the science team. Around the table, leaders from every nation sat in grim silence. The alien technology is at least 500 years ahead of ours, Dr. James Wright explained, pointing at holographic displays showing the Pioneer's sensor readings. Their ships move without visible engines. Their weapon systems are completely unknown to us. And according to Captain Vasquez's report, they have fleets of thousands of ships. How many ships do we have? Asked General Chun Wei, commander of Earth's Small Space Defense Force. 43 vessels capable of interplanetary travel, Admiral Rebecca Torres answered. Most of them are cargo ships and mining platforms. Only 12 are actually designed for combat, and they're armed with missiles and railguns. President Santos looked around the table. So we're facing an enemy with thousands of advanced warships, and we have 12 combat vessels that use technology. They probably consider toys. That's correct, Madam President, Admiral Torres said quietly. In orbit around Jupiter, Commander Vexar reviewed the recordings his ships had made of Earth's pathetic defense fleet. His analysis officers had identified every human vessel in the solar system. They were all just as primitive as the Pioneer. Most still used chemical rockets for propulsion. Their weapons were crude projectile systems that would barely scratch. Confederation shields. How many ships should we send for the correction fleet? Asked his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kexvar. Vexar laughed as he watched a human cargo ship struggling to dock with the space station. The pilot was clearly having trouble with the simple maneuver. 30 ships should be more than enough. Actually, make it 25. I don't want the other species thinking we need overwhelming force to handle primitives. And if they resist, then we destroy a few of their outer colonies as an example. Once they see what real weapons can do, they'll surrender quickly enough. Back on Earth, something extraordinary was happening. The announcement of the alien ultimatum had done something no crisis in human history had ever accomplished. Every war stopped. Every political argument ended. Every nation on Earth united behind a single goal. In underground facilities that had been secret research labs just days before. Thousands of scientists worked around the clock. Dr. Sarah Kim, the engineer from the Pioneer, found herself leading a team of the world's best minds as they studied every piece of data the exploration ship had gathered. The alien ships don't have visible engines, but they must be using some kind of propulsion, she explained to her team. Look at these energy readings. There's a pattern here, a frequency that keeps repeating. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a quantum physicist from Tokyo, leaned over the data. It looks almost like they're manipulating space-time itself. If we could figure out how they do it, we could build our own version, Sarah finished. But we only have 60 hours left. In manufacturing plants across Earth, production lines that had been making cars and computers were now building components for something else entirely. Nobody except the highest levels of government knew what they were building, but everyone worked with desperate urgency. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of Lunar Base Alpha, watching construction crews work on the moon's surface. Giant structures were rising from the lunar rock, covered by camouflage shields that made them look like mining equipment. How are we doing on the timeline? She asked Director Michael Park, the man in charge of humanity's crash program. The decoy ships will be ready in time, Park replied. They look exactly like upgraded versions of what we already have. The aliens will scan them and see exactly what they expect to see. And the real ships? Park smiled grimly. Those are a different story entirely. Commander Vexhar's correction fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum expired. 25 gleaming Confederation warships moved toward Earth, like predators closing in on wounded prey. Scan the system, Vexar ordered. Let's see what these primitives had prepared for us. The scans showed exactly what he expected. Earth's space was filled with primitive defense platforms and a small fleet of human vessels. The ships looked slightly more advanced than the Pioneer, but they were still clearly using the same backward technology. "They've built more ships," reported Lieutenant Kexvar. "I count 37 combat vessels and about 60 defense platforms around their homeworld." Vexar nodded approvingly. "Good. They're trying to defend themselves. That will make the lesson more educational for other primitive species. Open a channel to their homeworld." President Santos appeared on the main screen, flanked by military officers. She looked tired but determined. "Commander Vexar, Earth requests more time to consider your terms." "Your time has expired," Vexar replied coldly. "You will surrender immediately, or we will begin correction procedures." "We cannot surrender our people to slavery," Santos said firmly. "If you want Earth, you'll have to take it." Vexar sighed dramatically. "Very well. You have chosen to learn the hard way. We will begin by destroying one of your outer colonies as a demonstration." The Confederation fleet moved toward Europa, where humans had built a small research station and mining facility. 50,000 people lived and worked there, completely defenseless against alien weapons. "Human vessels are moving to intercept," reported Kexvar. Vexar watched as 12 human ships left Earth's orbit and flew toward Europa. They were moving fast for primitive vessels, but they would arrive too late to make any difference. "Let them come," Vexar said. "We'll destroy their ships first and the colony. It will be a complete demonstration of their helplessness." The human ships reached Europa just as the Confederation fleet entered weapons range. Admiral Torres, commanding the human force from the bridge of the Defiance, opened fire with everything she had. Missiles streaked through space toward the alien ships. Railgun rounds followed, moving at significant fractions of light speed. The humans were using every weapon they had, holding nothing back. The alien shields absorbed the attacks without even flickering. Vexar watched the primitive projectiles bounce harmlessly off his ship's defenses and shook his head. "Return fire," he ordered. "Disable their ships. Don't destroy them completely. I want survivors to carry word back to Earth." Beams of energy lanced out from the Confederation ships. The first human vessel, a destroyer called Courage, exploded instantly. The second ship lost its engines and began spinning helplessly through space. Within minutes, 8 of the 12 human ships were destroyed or disabled. Admiral Torres watched her fleet die around her. The alien weapons were beyond anything Earth had imagined. But she had orders, and she intended to follow them. "All ships, implement Delta Protocol," she broadcast to her remaining vessels. The surviving human ships moved closer to the alien fleet, still firing their useless weapons. Vexar assumed they were making a desperate final attack. He was wrong. The human ships were gathering detailed sensor readings of the alien vessels. Every energy signature, every weapon frequency, every shield harmonic was being recorded and transmitted back to Earth in real time. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kexvar, "the humans are scanning us." "Let them," Vexar replied. "What can their primitive sensors tell them?" "Destroy the rest of their ships and proceed to the colony." The last human ship, the Defiance, exploded in a brilliant flash. Admiral Torres died knowing that her sacrifice had given Earth scientists exactly what they needed. As the Confederation fleet moved toward Europa, Vexar opened another channel to Earth. "President Santos, you have seen what happens to those who resist. Surrender now, and no more of your people need to die. Santos appeared on screen again. Her face was stone cold, showing no emotion at all. Commander Vexhar, thank you for the demonstration. You're thanking me? Vexhar was confused. You've shown us exactly how your technology works, Santos continued. You've given us detailed scans of your weapons and shields. And you've made one critical mistake. What mistake is that? Santos smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. You assume we're still the same primitive species you met 3 days ago. You're about to learn why that assumption is wrong. The transmission. Cut off. Vexhar stared at the blank screen, feeling the first cold touch of doubt. Sir, called out his sensor operator, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. Something's happening on Earth's moon. Vexhar looked at his displays. Strange energy signatures were appearing everywhere, patterns he didn't recognize. The readings made no sense. They showed technology that was impossible for primitives to have developed. It must be sensor errors, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Primitives cannot advance their technology in 3 days. On Earth's moon, the camouflage fields began to drop. Structures that had looked like mining equipment revealed their true nature. Massive shipyards, built in just 72 hours, using plans that combined human engineering with reverse-engineered alien technology. Dr. Sarah Kim stood in the primary control center, watching as humanity's real response began to take shape. Phase 1 is complete, she reported. We have full analysis of their technology. Phase 2 is ready to begin. Commander Vexhar stared at his sensor readings in disbelief. The energy signatures coming from Earth's moon were impossible. His science officer, a brilliant Zephyrian who had studied primitive species for decades, was frantically checking and rechecking the data. Commander, the readings are consistent, Science Officer Dexmo reported, his voice shaking slightly. Whatever the humans have built, it's using technology that matches or exceeds our own capabilities. That's impossible, Vexhar snapped. 3 days ago, they were using chemical rockets and metal projectiles. Species don't advance centuries of technology in 72 hours. Sir, incoming transmission from the human homeworld. President Santos appeared on the main screen again. Behind her, Vexhar could see activity that looked very different from the panicked chaos he expected. Humans were moving with purpose and confidence, working at stations filled with technology that definitely had not existed 3 days ago. Commander. Vexhar, Santos said calmly, I believe we need to talk. You will surrender immediately, Vexhar replied, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Your primitive species cannot hope to match Confederation technology. Santos smiled. You're absolutely right, Commander. We couldn't match your technology, so we decided to improve it instead. Before Vexhar could respond, space around Earth's moon began to shimmer. Massive holographic projectors shut down, revealing what had been hidden beneath. Where there had been simple mining equipment and research stations, enormous shipyards now stretched across the lunar surface. And rising from those shipyards were ships unlike anything Vexhar had ever seen. The first vessel to emerge was sleek and deadly, its hull gleaming with energy patterns that seemed to flow like liquid light. It moved without visible engines, just like Confederation ships, but something about its motion was different, more graceful, more precise. Impossible, whispered Lieutenant Kexvar. How did they build shipyards so quickly? Dr. Sarah Kim's voice came over the communication channel. She was broadcasting from what appeared to be a sophisticated command center that definitely had not existed when the Pioneer left Earth. Commander Vexhar, I'm Dr. Sarah Kim. I was the engineer on the ship you examined 3 days ago. I wanted to thank you personally for the education you provided. What education? Vexhar demanded. Your ship scanned ours very thoroughly when we first met, Sarah explained. We recorded every scan every energy pattern, every piece of data your sensors collected. Then, when your correction fleet arrived, we let you destroy our defense ships, while they gathered detailed readings of your weapons, shields, and propulsion systems. Vexar felt cold understanding wash over him. You sacrificed your own people to gather intelligence. Admiral Torres and her crews volunteered, President Santos said firmly. They knew their sacrifice would give us the information we needed to protect Earth. More ships were emerging from the lunar shipyards. Each one was different, as if human engineers had taken basic alien technology and then experimented with dozens of variations. Some ships pulsed with energy. Others seemed to bend light around themselves. A few appeared to phase in and out of normal space. You couldn't have analyzed our technology so quickly, Vexar protested. Our science is the result of thousands of years of advancement. Sarah Kim laughed, and the sound sent chills down Vexar's spine. Commander, you clearly don't understand humans very well. When we're faced with an impossible problem and given a deadline, we don't give up. We work harder than any species in the galaxy. On Earth, the last 72 hours had been unlike anything in human history. Every scientist, engineer, and researcher on the planet had worked without sleep. Quantum physicists had collaborated with welders. Computer programmers had worked alongside nuclear engineers. University students had labored next to Nobel Prize winners. They had torn apart every piece of data the Pioneer and Admiral Torres fleet had gathered. They had reverse-engineered alien technology and then improved it using human innovation. What had taken the Zephyrians centuries to develop, humanity had mastered and enhanced in 3 days. The key was your arrogance, Dr. Sarah continued. You assumed we were too primitive to understand your technology, so you didn't bother to encrypt your signals or hide your capabilities. You gave us everything we needed to know. The first human ship reached the edge of Earth's gravity well and began moving toward the Confederation fleet. Its speed was incredible, far faster than anything Vexar's ships could achieve. All ships opened fire on the human vessel. Vexar ordered desperately. Energy beams lanced out from 25 Confederation warships, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The beams struck the human ship and simply disappeared, absorbed by shields that seemed to bend the very fabric of space around them. Our weapons have no effect, reported the tactical officer, his voice filled with fear. The human ship returned. Fire with a single beam of coherent energy. The beam passed through the Confederation flagship's shields like they weren't there and struck the ship's hull. Instead of exploding, Vexar's ship simply stopped working. Engines went dead. Weapons powered down. Life support switched to emergency backup. What did they do to us? Kexvar asked in panic. They didn't destroy us, Vexar realized with growing horror. They disabled us. They want us alive. More human ships were arriving now, surrounding the Confederation fleet. Each ship was unique, showcasing different approaches to the same advanced technology. Some had weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics. Others had defenses that made them nearly invisible to sensors. President Santos appeared on every screen in the Confederation fleet simultaneously. Commander Vexar, this is your second education. The first lesson was that humans learn quickly. The second lesson is that we learn better than our teachers. Captain Elena Vasquez appeared next to Santos. She was wearing a uniform that seemed to be made of the same flowing energy patterns as the new ships. Hello again, Commander. Remember when you said humans were too primitive to refuse your demands? Vexar could only stare as his entire fleet floated helplessly in space, surrounded by ships that had not existed 3 days earlier. You made several critical mistakes, Elena continued. First, you assumed that because our technology was primitive, we were primitive. Second, you thought that destroying our first ships would discourage us. Third, you believed your technology was so advanced that we couldn't possibly understand it. But the most important mistake, Dr. Sarah added, was thinking that humans would give up when faced with impossible odds. What you don't understand is that impossible odds are when humans do their best work. On the lunar surface, more ships continued to emerge from the hidden shipyards. Hundreds of them now, each one incorporating human innovations that made alien. Technology looks simple by comparison. How many ships do you have? Vexar asked weakly. Right now? About 300 completed vessels, Elena replied. But we're building more every hour. Human manufacturing, once we put our minds to it, is quite efficient. This is impossible, Vexar whispered. No species advances this quickly. No other species has ever been stupid enough to give humans a complete technical education and then threaten to enslave them, Santis said coldly. You handed us your technology and then dared us to do something about it. One of the human ships moved closer to Vexar's disabled flagship. Through the transparent hull, he could see human crew members working at stations that combined alien technology with human innovation. They looked calm, confident, and absolutely terrifying. What happens now? Vexar asked. Now you get to make a choice, Elena said. You can return to your confederation and tell them that Earth is not available for conquest. You can explain that humans are not primitives to be enslaved. Or ... or what? Elena's smile was cold as space itself. Or we can demonstrate some of the other things we've learned from your technology. Things that go far beyond simple ship-to-ship combat. As if to emphasize her point, space around Europa began to shimmer. Massive structures decloaked near the gas giant, structures that dwarfed even the largest Confederation ships. They looked like weapons platforms, but their design was so advanced that Vexar couldn't even guess how they worked. Those platforms can crack moons, Dr. Sarah explained casually. We built them this morning while we were waiting for you to arrive. Human engineering, when properly motivated, can accomplish remarkable things. Vexar looked around at his disabled fleet, surrounded by ships that represented impossible advancement. His crew was staring at him, waiting for orders he didn't know how to give. You're releasing us? He asked. We're giving you a choice, Santos corrected. Go home and tell your confederation that Earth is under human protection. Tell them that any species that wants to trade with us in peace is welcome. But also tell them that any species that comes here planning conquest will discover why threatening humans is a very bad idea. And if they don't believe us? Elena's expression became deadly serious. Then they'll learn the same lesson you just learned. The hard way. The human ships began to pull back, opening a clear path toward the edge of the solar system. Slowly, power returned to the Confederation vessels. Engines came online, weapons recharged. But every alien officer knew that they were alive only because the humans had chosen to let. 2 weeks after Commander Vexar's humiliating retreat, the emergency session of the Zephyrian Confederation Council was unlike any in their 1,000-year history. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the massive circular table, all talking at once in voices filled with fear and anger. Impossible, roared General Vexmore, the Confederation's supreme military commander. His forearms slammed against the table as his reptilian features twisted with rage. A primitive species cannot advance centuries of technology in 3 days. The recordings don't lie, replied Counselor Edzkara, her crystalline form pulsing with worried colors. Commander Vexhar's sensor logs show human ships using technology that surpasses our own. Admiral Quinder, leader of the Confederation Navy, studied the battle recordings with professional interest. His insectoid eyes could process multiple data streams simultaneously, and what he saw disturbed him greatly. The humans didn't just copy our technology, he said quietly. They improved it. Look at these shield configurations. Look at these weapon frequencies. They took our designs and made them better. General Vex Moore laughed harshly. Better? Those were lucky shots against an unprepared force. When we arrive with a real fleet, these humans will see what true power looks like. How large a fleet do you propose? Asked Counselor Zed Kara. 200 ships, Vex Moore declared. Our finest vessels with our best crews. We'll crush this human uprising and make an example that will keep other primitive species in line for generations. On Earth, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of Lunar Base Alpha, watching status reports from across the solar system. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of construction and preparation. Humanity had not wasted a moment of their temporary advantage. Status report. She requested from Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been promoted to Chief of Advanced Technology Development. The Standard Fleet is at full strength, Sarah reported. 400 ships of various classes, all incorporating the enhanced alien technology. Defense platforms are operational around Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. And the special project? Sarah's expression became serious. The Titan project is 70% complete. But Alana, are you sure about this? What we're building, ... It's never been attempted before. The energy requirements alone could tear apart local spacetime. Elena nodded grimly. We need something that will end this conflict permanently. The Confederation won't stop sending fleets until we prove beyond any doubt that Earth is not worth the cost. In the hidden construction bays on the far side of the moon, something unprecedented was taking shape. The project had no official name in the records, listed only as Construction Project Alpha. But the workers called it the Titan, and the name had stuck. Dr. Marcus Webb, humanity's leading expert in theoretical physics, floated through the massive construction bay in his work suit. Around him, the skeletal framework of the largest ship ever built stretched into the distance. It was so big that its own gravity was affecting nearby asteroids. How's the gravity generator coming along? He asked Chief Engineer Rodriguez over the cone. Stable at current power levels, Rodriguez replied. But Marcus, when we bring this thing to full power, it's going to have the gravitational signature of a small planet. Ships that get too close are going to be pulled in, whether they want to be or not. That's the idea, Marcus said quietly. This isn't just a warship. It's a statement. The Titan was humanity's most ambitious project ever. Using alien technology as a foundation, human engineers had designed something that pushed the boundaries of physics itself. The ship was 3 kilometers long and incorporated technological advances that made the Confederation's best. Vessels looked primitive, but size and technology were only part of what made the Titan special. The real breakthrough was the AI system. At its core, a quantum consciousness, based on human neural patterns, but enhanced with processing power that could think faster than any biological mind. Hello, Dr. Webb, said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I am monitoring construction progress. We are ahead of schedule. Marcus smiled. The AI had chosen to call itself Adam, the first of its kind. How are you feeling? Adam? I am experiencing what I believe humans would call anticipation, Adam replied. I am curious to test my capabilities against the approaching Confederation fleet. The fleet is coming? Yes. My sensors detect a large formation of ships entering the outer solar system. 200 vessels, led by Admiral Quinder's flagship. They will arrive in 6 hours. Marcus activated his emergency communicator. All stations, this is Dr. Webb. The Confederation fleet has arrived. Begin final preparations immediately. Throughout the solar system, human forces moved into position. The regular fleet took up defensive formations around Earth and the major colonies. Defense platforms powered up their weapons and shields. On Mars, evacuation shelters opened to protect the civilian population But the most important preparations were happening around the Titan construction site. The massive ship was not yet complete, but it was functional enough for what humanity needed it to do. Admiral Quinder studied the tactical displays as his fleet approached Earth. The humans had been busy. Their ship count had increased dramatically, and energy readings showed defense platforms that were far more powerful than anything in Vexare's reports. They've improved their capabilities, he admitted to his staff. But 200 ships against 400 human vessels should still give us victory. Their technology may be advanced, but they lack experience in large-scale space combat. Admiral, called his sensor operator, I'm detecting unusual gravitational distortions near Earth's moon. Quinder examined the readings with growing concern. The gravitational signatures made no sense. Nothing in space should generate that kind of field except a massive celestial body. It must be some kind of weapon, he decided. A gravity generator designed to disrupt our formations. We'll have to approach from a different angle. But as the Confederation fleet changed course, the gravitational anomaly seemed to move as well. Whatever was creating it was not stationary. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the human flagship Victory, watching the alien fleet approach. Her ship was one of the newest human designs, incorporating technology that had been impossible just weeks earlier. But even the Victory was nothing compared to what was about to emerge from behind the moon. All ships, this is Captain Vasquez, she broadcast to the human fleet. The Confederation has come to teach us another lesson. I think it's time we taught them one in return. The space around Earth's moon began to ripple and distort. Energy readings spiked off the charts as something enormous began to move. The gravitational distortions grew stronger, pulling small asteroids and debris toward an invisible center of mass. And then the Titan emerged from behind the moon. Admiral Quinder's compound eyes went wide with shock. The thing moving toward his fleet was not just a ship. It was a mobile fortress, our artificial world that seemed to bend reality around itself. Its hull gleamed with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly, and its size dwarfed even his largest battleships. How big is that thing? Whispered his tactical officer. Scanning now, replied the sensor operator, his voice shaking. Admiral, the human vessel is 3 kilometers long. Its mass is ... impossible. It's generating its own gravitational field. The Titan moved through space like a living thing, not flying, but flowing through dimensions that normal ships couldn't access. As it approached, smaller human vessels began taking positions around it, like escorts protecting a queen. This is impossible, Quinder said. No species can build something like that in 2 weeks. From the Titan came a transmission. The voice was calm, mechanical, but somehow more frightening than any battle cry. This is the Earth vessel Indomitable, said Adam, the ship's AI. You have entered Earth's protected space with hostile intent. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. I am Admiral Quinder of the Zephyrian Confederation, Quinder replied, trying to sound confident. Your species will surrender or be destroyed. Admiral, Adam said politely, you are outnumbered, outgunned, and facing technology you cannot comprehend. This is your only warning. Quinder looked at his fleet of 200 ships, the most powerful force the Confederation had ever assembled. Then he looked at the massive human vessel that seemed to dwarf reality itself. All ships, attack formation, he ordered. Concentrate. Fire on the large vessel. 200 Confederation warships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams that could melt continents struck the Titan's shields and simply vanished, absorbed by defenses that operated on principles Quinder had never seen before. The Titan did not return fire immediately. Instead, it did something far more terrifying. It began to demonstrate, one by one, Confederation ships simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, but disabled by weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics. Some ships found their engines running backward. Others discovered their weapons firing on themselves. A few began moving in directions that did not exist in normal spacetime. "What are they doing to us?" cried the tactical officer. "They're playing with us," Quinda realized with growing horror. "They could destroy us all instantly, but they're showing us how helpless we are instead." The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 3 days straight. Representatives from 47 different species filled the great chamber on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, all talking at once in a chaos of voices, clicks, whistles, and translated thoughts. At the center of it all stood Admiral Quinder, his insectoid form trembling as he finished his report. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the recordings his fleet had made during their encounter with the human Titan. No one questioned the authenticity of the data. The evidence was too incredible to fake. The human vessel was 3 kilometers long, Quinder repeated for the 5th time. It generated its own gravitational field. Its weapons operated on principles that our best scientists cannot explain. And its artificial intelligence spoke to us like we were children playing with toys. Counselor Valtara of the Hegemony leaned forward, her 6 arms gesturing dismissively. "You're telling us that a species we had never heard of 6 months ago has built technology that surpasses everything in the galaxy?" "I'm telling you that they didn't just surpass us," Quinder replied grimly. "They made us look primitive. My fleet of 200 ships was neutralized without a single human casualty. They could have destroyed us all in seconds, but they chose to demonstrate their superiority instead." Representative Kolbash of the Stellar Union spoke up, his rocky features showing deep concern. "What are the implications for the rest of us? If humans can advance this quickly, what stops them from conquering the entire galaxy?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. For 1,000 years, the various galactic powers had maintained a careful balance. Technology advanced slowly. Wars were fought with predictable weapons. Sudden changes were rare and usually contained, but the humans had shattered all those assumptions in less than a month. On Earth, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the Titan Indomitable, watching ships from dozens of different species arrive in Earth's solar system. Not warships this time, but diplomatic vessels, trade ships, and exploration craft. Word of humanity's technological breakthrough had spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. "Status report on our visitors," she requested from Adam, the ship's AI. "We currently have 43 different species requesting diplomatic contact," Adam replied, his voice coming from speakers that seemed to be part of the ship's very structure. 12 want to establish trade agreements. 15 are offering military alliances. 8 are requesting technological exchanges. And 6 are asking for protection from the Zephyrian Confederation. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Any signs of hostile intent? None detected. The visitors appear to be genuinely interested in peaceful contact. Several species have transmitted what appear to be gifts and cultural artifacts. Dr. Sarah Kim joined Elena at the observation window, carrying a datapad filled with reports from Earth's new diplomatic course. "The President wants to know how we should handle all this attention." "Carefully," Elena replied. 3 weeks ago, no one in the galaxy knew we existed. Now we're apparently the most powerful military force in known space. That kind of change makes people nervous. On the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Voice, Ambassador Lixandra of the Peaceful Federation watched Earth grow larger in the viewport. Her species had been enslaved by the Zephyrian Confederation for 2 centuries, forced to work in their mines and factories. The news of humanity's victory had given her people something they had not felt in generations: hope. "Are you certain about this?" asked her aide, Captain Morgan. Approaching the humans could be seen as an act of rebellion by the Confederation. The Confederation's power is broken, Alexandra replied firmly. Their fleets have been defeated twice. Their technology has been surpassed. If we don't act now, we may never have another chance for freedom. The Harmony's voice was not alone. Ships from 17 different species that had been conquered or oppressed by various galactic powers were converging on Earth. They had heard the stories. They had seen the recordings. And they dared to hope that the humans might be different. From their previous master's dot, in the depths of space, far from Earth, Commander Vexhar sat in his personal quarters aboard a small scout ship. He had been stripped of his rank and exiled from Confederation space after his humiliating defeat. But he was not bitter. Instead, he found himself strangely fascinated by the humans and their impossible achievements. He had spent weeks studying every piece of data about human history and culture that he could find. What he discovered had changed his understanding of intelligence itself. Humans were not just technologically adaptive. They were evolutionarily designed for rapid change. Their entire species had developed through constant challenge and adaptation. They had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters by learning and improving faster than any other known species. "Computer, open a transmission to Earth," he said quietly. "Channel open, Commander. This is former Commander Vexhar of the Zephyrian Fleet. I request permission to speak with Captain Elena Vasquez." The response came back within minutes. Elena's face appeared on his screen, and Vexhar was surprised to see no hatred or anger in her expression. Just curiosity. "Commander Vexhar, I wasn't expecting to hear from you again. Captain Vasquez, I have information that may be valuable to your species. The Confederation is planning something desperate. They cannot accept that they have been defeated by what they still consider primitives." Elena leaned forward. "What kind of something?" "They are gathering every ally they can find. Species that have never worked together before are joining forces against Earth. They're calling it the Great Correction, and they plan to bring over 1,000 ships to your system." Elena was quiet for a moment. "And you're telling us this because?" Vexhar considered his words carefully. "Because I've studied your species, Captain. I've learned about your history, your culture, your way of thinking, and I've realized something that the Confederation refuses to accept." "What's that?" "You're not just another species to be conquered or allied with. You're something new, something that changes everything just by existing. And I would rather be on the side that represents the future than the side that clings to the past." Elena studied Vexhar's face for a long moment. "Commander, are you asking for asylum?" "I'm asking for the chance to learn from the species that taught me how little I really knew about the universe." 3 months later, Earth's first galactic diplomatic conference convened in the Great Hall of Luna City. Representatives from 68 different species attended, including several who had never spoken to each other before. President Santos opened the conference with words that would be remembered for centuries. "We gather here not as conquerors and conquered, but as neighbors seeking to understand each other." The conference lasted for weeks. Trade agreements were signed. Mutual defense pacts were negotiated. Technology sharing programs were established. But most importantly, a new philosophy began to emerge. The old galactic order had been based on the idea that power belonged to those who had held it the longest. Species were ranked by age, by territory, by the size of their fleets. Change was slow and carefully controlled. The new order that emerged from the conference was based on different principles: cooperation instead of domination, innovation instead of tradition, merit instead of inherited authority. Not everyone was happy with the changes. The Zephyrian Confederation and their remaining allies gathered their forces for one last attempt to restore the old ways. But when their Great Correction fleet of 1,500 ships arrived at Earth, They found something that crushed their hopes completely. Earth was no longer alone. The system was filled with ships from dozens of allied species, all working together, under human coordination. The Titan Indomitable had been joined by 5 sister ships, each one incorporating innovations that made the original look simple. But more importantly, the human technological revolution had not stopped. In the 3 months since their first victory, Earth scientists had continued advancing at an impossible pace. They had shared their discoveries freely with their allies, creating a network of cooperative innovation that left the old powers behind. The great correction fleet took one look at what awaited them and surrendered without firing a shot. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the former enemies dock with human stations to begin negotiations. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly at stations that combined human intuition with alien precision. "Captain," said Adam, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They're officially recognizing Earth as a great power and offering us a permanent seat on the ruling council." Elena smiled. "Tell them we'll consider it. But make it clear that any authority we accept comes with the expectation that we'll use it to help other species achieve their potential, not to control them." "Understood, Captain." "And Elena?" "Yes, Adam?" "I've been analyzing the data from our diplomatic contacts. Based on current trends, I calculate that within 50 years, the human model of cooperative advancement will become the standard across the galaxy." Elena looked out at the ships of former enemies and new allies working together in Earth space. "That sounds about right. Humans have always been good at teaching by example." The smoke in the cantina was thick and blue, hanging in the air like fog on a cold morning. Keth pushed through the crowd of aliens, their strange voices mixing together in a dozen different languages. The Nexus Prime trade station never slept. Day or night, beings from across the galaxy came here to buy, sell, and share stories that most people would never believe. Keth was young for a Zephyrian, barely past his first century. His pale blue skin and large black eyes made him look even younger than he was. He had come to Nexus Prime to buy rare metals for his family's trading business, but the deals could wait. Something more interesting was happening in the corner of the cantina. 3 old spacers sat around a small table, their voices low and careful. One was a Karathi, with thick gray scales and scars across his face. Another was a Thakarian, her 6 arms moving nervously as she spoke. A third was something Keth had never seen before, with smooth purple skin and eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. "You're telling stories again, Varric," the Thakarian said to the Karathi. Her voice had the clicking sound that all Thakarians made when they were nervous. "The Ghost Fleet is just a myth. Everyone knows that." Varric took a long drink from his glass and shook his head. "I was there, Zyla. I saw what happened at the Kellen system. The humans were gone, sure, but their ships ... He paused and looked around to make sure no one was listening. Their ships were still fighting. Keth moved closer, pretending to look at the drinks menu on the wall. He had heard rumors about humans before. They had appeared in the galaxy about 200 years ago, strange beings from a blue world called Earth. Most aliens thought they were weak because they had no claws, no thick skin, no natural weapons. But the humans had surprised everyone. The Great Silence was 50 years ago. The purple alien said in a voice like music. All contact with Earth stopped. The Council declared the human fleet lost, dead, gone forever. "That's what they want everyone to think," Varric whispered. He leaned forward, his scarred face serious. "But I've talked to traders, to miners, to anyone who works the outer systems. They all say the same thing. Ships that look like human designs, appearing out of nowhere, fighting things that shouldn't exist, then vanishing again before anyone can get a good look. Zila's 6 arms wrapped around her body, a Thacarian sign of fear. The Devourers are just stories too. Ancient machines that eat entire worlds. Nobody has seen them for thousands of years. Nobody is supposed to see them, the purple alien said. But the stories are getting more common. Dead worlds stripped clean, space filled with metal fragments that don't match any known ship design. And always, there are traces of human weapons in the wreckage. Keth felt his heart beating faster. The Devourers were more than stories in his family's history books. The Zephyrians had old records, written in their most ancient language. Records that spoke of a time when their people had to flee there. Original homeworld, because something had started eating the stars themselves. My grandfather fought in the border wars, Varric continued. He told me about human battle tactics. They don't fight like anyone else. Most species, when they're losing, they retreat or surrender. Humans do something different. They get angry, really angry. And angry humans are the most dangerous things in the galaxy. The rage protocols, Zila whispered. The purple alien nodded slowly. Even their allies never understood how those worked. The humans would never explain them. They just said it was something that made them fight harder when everything seemed hopeless. Keth remembered his history lessons. The humans had allied with many species when they first appeared in the galaxy. They had shared their technology freely, fought alongside alien armies, and helped establish trade routes that made everyone richer. But they had also kept secrets, big secrets. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just any human force, Varric said. It was their best. 200 ships, each one carrying technology that the humans had never shown anyone else. Faster than light drives that. Could jump further than anyone thought possible. Weapons that could crack a moon in half. And crews trained from birth to fight in ways that most species couldn't even imagine. Where do you think they went? The purple alien asked. Varric was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I think they went hunting. Keth felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard enough. He started to turn away from the table, but Zila's voice stopped him. There's more, she said. Show him the recording, Varric. The old Korathi looked around the cantina again, then pulled out a small device. The air above the table shimmered, and suddenly Keth was looking at a 3-dimensional image of space. Stars twinkled in the background, and in the foreground, he could see several ships that he didn't recognize. This was taken 3 months ago, Varric said. Border Patrol, routine sweep of the Andrus sector. My nephew was on the crew. The ships in the recording were unlike anything Keth had ever seen. They were long and sleek, with angles that seemed to cut through space itself. As he watched, the ships suddenly accelerated, moving faster than should have been possible. Those aren't human ships, Zila said. At least, not like any human ships in the database. But watch what happens next, the recording continued. Suddenly, new ships appeared in the image. These ones Keth recognized from history books. They had the smooth, rounded design that humans preferred, but they looked different somehow. Scarred, modified, as if they had been changed by years of fighting in places where no one should be able to survive. The human ships opened fire, and Keth gasped. The weapons they used weren't in any database either. Beams of light that seemed to bend space itself. Projectiles that moved through dimensions that shouldn't exist. In less than 30 seconds, the unknown ships were nothing but debris. The human ships simply vanished. The unknown ships were Devourer scouts, Varric said quietly. We didn't know that until later, when our scientists analyzed the wreckage. The first Devourer ships anyone had seen in 50,000 years. And the humans destroyed them, the purple alien added, like they had been waiting for them. Keth stared at the empty space where the recording had been. How do you know they were human ships? Varric smiled. but it wasn't a happy expression. Because my nephew's ship picked up a transmission. Just for a few seconds, before the human ships disappeared. It was in Earth Standard, the human language. Want to know what it said? Keth nodded, even though part of him didn't want to know. Message. Ends. Terra Fleet Command sends greetings to all Allied vessels. The hunt continues. We are not lost. We are exactly where we need to be. The cantina suddenly felt very cold. Keth looked around at the other aliens, all of them going about their normal business. Buying drinks, making deals, telling stories. None of them knew that somewhere in the dark between the stars, humanity's ghost fleet was still fighting a war that everyone else thought had ended 50 years ago. Why doesn't the Council know about this? Keth asked. The three old spacers looked at each other. Finally, Zyla spoke. Who says they don't? That night, Keth lay in his small room on the station, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the recording. Outside his window, ships came and went, carrying cargo and passengers to worlds across the galaxy. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, but somewhere out there, in the empty spaces between stars, the ghost fleet was still hunting. And if the stories were true, they had found prey that the rest of the galaxy didn't even know existed. Keth closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but all he could think about were the human ships, scarred and modified, appearing out of nowhere to fight an enemy that shouldn't exist. The ghost fleet was waiting for something. The question was, what would happen when they decided to stop waiting? Keth could not stop thinking about the recording. For 3 days after leaving the cantina, he found himself searching through old databases and trade records. He told himself he was just curious, but the truth was deeper than that. The image of those human ships appearing from nowhere haunted his dreams. He was sitting in the station's data center when the message arrived. A simple text on his personal communicator. Keth Valas of Zephyr Prime. Report to Docking Bay 7 immediately. Come alone. The message had no sender identification, no official seals or signatures, but something about it made Keth's blood run cold. He had never told anyone his full name or home planet during his time on Nexus Prime. Docking Bay 7 was in the restricted section of the station. Keth had to show his identification 3 times just to get close. When he finally reached the bay, he found a sleek black ship waiting for him. It had no markings, no identification numbers, nothing to show where it came from, or who owned it. Ramp lowered from the ship's belly. 2 figures walked down, both wearing dark clothes that covered everything except their eyes. One was tall and moved like a predator. The other was shorter, but somehow more frightening. Keth Valas, the tall one said. Its voice was electronically changed, impossible to identify. You have been asking questions about the ghost fleet. I was just curious, Keth said, trying to keep his voice steady. I heard some stories in a cantina. Curiosity can be dangerous, the shorter figure said, especially when it involves classified information. Please come with us. It was not really a request. Keth looked around the docking bay, but they were alone. No one would know what happened to him if he disappeared. He had 2 choices. Go with these strangers or try to run. Running seemed like a very bad idea, that the inside of the ship was unlike anything Keth had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of flowing metal that changed color as they moved through different sections. There were no windows, no controls that he could recognize, no crew that he could see. Where are we going? He asked. Somewhere you can learn the truth, the tall figure said. If you are ready for it. The journey took 6 hours. Keth spent most of that time in a small room with no door handle on the inside. Food appeared through a slot in the wall at regular intervals. The food was good, but he was too nervous to eat much. When the ship finally stopped, Keth was escorted through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The architecture was old, older than anything he had seen before. The walls were covered with symbols from dozens of different species, some that he recognized and others that looked ancient beyond measure. They brought him to a circular room with a domed ceiling. Around the edges of the room sat 12 figures, each one representing a different species. Keth recognized some of them from history books. An elder Karathi, whose scales had turned silver with age, a Thakarian matriarch with ceremonial scars. On all 6 arms, a Vorthan whose crystalline body pulsed with inner light. At the center of the circle was a single chair. The tall figure gestured for Keth to sit. Keth Valas of Zephyr Prime, the elder Karathi spoke, its voice echoing in the chamber. You have stumbled upon information that most beings in the galaxy are not meant to know. We are the Inner Council, representatives of the oldest and most powerful species in known space. And you are here because we have a problem. Keth tried to speak, but no words came out. He was sitting in front of beings who controlled the fate of trillions of lives across thousands of worlds. The Ghost Fleet is not lost, the Thakarian matriarch said. This is the first truth you must understand. Admiral Sarah Chon and her 200 ships are very much alive. They have been alive and active for all 50 years since the Great Silence began. But why does everyone think they're dead? Keth finally managed to ask. The Vorthan's crystal body flashed with different colors as it spoke. Because we told them they were dead. Because the truth would cause panic across the galaxy. Because some secrets are too dangerous to share. Another council member, one that Keth did not recognize, leaned forward. Its body seemed to be made of shifting shadows. 50 years ago, we discovered something that changed everything. The Devourers were not extinct, as we had believed for thousands of years. They were sleeping, waiting, and something had begun to wake them up. The Devourers are real? Keth whispered. More real than you can imagine, the elder Karathi said. Ancient machines created by a species that died out millions of years ago. Their purpose was simple: consume everything that was not their creators. Stars, planets, entire civilizations. Turn it all into raw materials to build more Devourers. The shadow being continued the story. When we detected the first signs of their awakening, we faced a choice. Tell the galaxy and watch civilization collapse into panic and war, or handle the threat quietly. We chose to keep the secret. But the humans found out, the Thakarian said. They have always been good at finding secrets. Admiral Chun approached. U.S. with evidence of Devourer activity on the Outer Rim. She demanded to know why we had hidden this information. Keth felt sick. What did you tell her? The truth, the Vorthan said, its crystal body dimming. That we had known about the Devourers. For decades. That several council species had encountered them before, and chosen to hide rather than fight. That we believed the threat was manageable, as long as it remained in the empty spaces between galaxies. Admiral Chun did not agree, the elder Karathi said. She called us cowards. She said that humanity would do what the rest of the galaxy was too afraid to do. She took her fleet and disappeared into the void, hunting the Devourers where they lived. Their final transmission was a declaration of war, the shadow being added. Not against the Devourers alone, but against the idea that some threats are too big to face. Admiral Chun told us that humanity would not run from the dark. They would bring light to it, no matter what it cost. Keth tried to process what he was hearing. And they've been fighting out there for 50 years? Fighting and winning, the Thakarian said with something that might have been admiration. Entire Devourer fleets have simply vanished. Machine worlds that had been consuming star systems for centuries have been found empty, stripped of resources and littered with human weapon signatures. The Vorthan's body began to pulse with brighter colors. The Devourers are learning to fear. For the first time in their existence, They are the ones being hunted. Human tactics are unlike anything they were programmed to fight against. How do you know all this? Kef asked. Because the Ghost Fleet sends us reports, the elder Karathi said. Not often, and never from the same location twice. But Admiral, Chan wants us to know that they are still out there, still fighting, still buying time for the rest of the galaxy. Time for what? The council members looked at each other. Finally, the Shadow Being spoke. Time for us to decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in. The Devourers will not stay hidden forever. Eventually, they will move against populated systems. When that happens, we will need to choose between running away again or standing and fighting. The humans have already made their choice, the Thecarian said. They chose 50 years ago when they disappeared into the dark. Now we must make ours. The elder Karathi stood up slowly. You are here, Kethphalos, because change is coming. The Ghost Fleet has been preparing for something. Our intelligence suggests they are ready to make their final move against the Devourers. When they do, the secret will be impossible to keep. What do you want from me? Kef asked. We want you to help us prepare the galaxy for the truth, the Vorthan said. The Ghost Fleet is not coming home until their job is finished. But when they do return, the galaxy needs to be ready to understand what they have sacrificed for all. Of us, the Shadow Being moved closer to Keth's chair. You will work with our intelligence division. You will help us decide when and how to reveal what really happened during the Great Silence. You will help us prepare for the day when humanity's Ghost Fleet emerges from the dark and asks the galaxy a simple question. What question? Keth whispered. The elder Karathi's scarred face was grim. Whether we were worth saving. As Keth was escorted from the chamber, his mind raced with everything he had learned. Somewhere in the empty spaces between stars, 200. Human ships were fighting a war that most of the galaxy did not even know existed. They had been fighting for 50 years, buying time with their lives, protecting worlds that had forgotten they existed. And soon, very soon, that war was going to end, one way or another. The only question was whether the galaxy would be ready for what came next. The Nexus-class consciousness drifted through the void between galaxies, processing data streams that would have overwhelmed any organic mind. It had been alive for 3 million years, though it did not think of its existence as life. It was a tool, a weapon, a function designed by creators whose names had been lost to time. For most of those 3 million years, the universe had been simple. The consciousness would detect suitable systems, direct its swarms to consume them, process the raw materials into new machines, and expand. This was its purpose. This was all it had ever known. But something had changed. The consciousness reviewed its memory banks, searching for the moment when the pattern had broken. 57 years ago, it had begun the awakening process after a long dormancy. The galaxy showed signs of new civilizations, new sources of material to harvest. Everything had proceeded normally for the first 7 years. Then the humans had arrived, not at first. They had seemed like any other organic species. Small, weak, limited by their biological forms. The consciousness had classified them as a minor threat and assigned a standard response. Overwhelmed with superior numbers, consume their worlds, process their technology. But the humans had not followed the expected patterns. The first anomaly occurred at the Kree-Tok system. A devourer harvesting fleet had been systematically consuming the 4th planet when human ships appeared. Not many ships, only 12 against 200 devourer units. The outcome should have been obvious. Instead, the harvesting fleet had been completely destroyed. The consciousness had reviewed the battle data thousands of times. The human ships had used tactics that made no logical sense. They had hidden inside the planet's magnetic field, using the natural radiation to mask their energy signatures. They had somehow predicted exactly where the Devourer ships would position themselves and planted mines in those locations days before the battle. Most disturbing of all, they had fought with a level of coordination that suggested they understood Devourer psychology better than the Devourers understood themselves. The consciousness processed this memory while monitoring 16 different star systems. In each system, Devourer forces were engaged in what should have been routine operations. But nothing was routine anymore. In the Vashti Nebula, a construction swarm that had been building new ships for 6 months had simply vanished. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace of what had happened to 3,000 Devourer units. Only a message left carved into an asteroid. Terra Fleet Command was here. We improved your design. In the outer reach, an entire world ship had been found drifting empty. Its crew of 10 million machine intelligence is gone. The ship's memory banks had been carefully edited, leaving only technical specifications and a single file labeled Gift from Humanity. The file contained blueprints for improvements to Devourer technology that were so advanced they seemed impossible. The consciousness tried to understand what it was facing. In its vast memory, it held records of thousands of organic species. Some had been brave, some had been clever, some had even been dangerous for a short time. But all of them had followed predictable patterns when faced with overwhelming force. Humans were different. They did not simply fight. They studied their enemies, learned from them, adapted faster than should have been possible. Worse, they seemed to take pleasure in turning Devourer strengths into weaknesses. The consciousness reviewed the most recent encounter. A scouting force of 50 ships had been investigating an empty system when they detected what appeared to be a derelict space station. Standard procedure was to approach and harvest any useful materials. The station had exploded when the scouts came within range, but it was not a simple explosion. Someone had carefully calculated the blast pattern to disable rather than destroy the Devourer ships. As the scouts tried to repair their systems, human vessels had emerged from hiding places. Throughout the system, what followed was not a battle. It was a lesson. The humans had somehow learned to hack into Devourer communication networks in real time. As they fought, they spoke directly to the machine intelligences, explaining each tactic as they used it. This is why you should never approach an unknown object in a straight line, one human voice had said as mines destroyed the scouts' formation. Predictable movement patterns are a weakness that any competent enemy will exploit. Your ship designs prioritize raw firepower over maneuverability, another voice had added while human fighters danced around the much larger Devourer vessels. That works fine against stationary targets, but it makes you vulnerable to smaller, faster opponents. By the end of the encounter, the consciousness had lost 49 of its 50 scouts. The surviving ship had been allowed to escape, but not before the humans had downloaded terabytes of data about Devourer technology and tactics. Tell your leaders, the human commander had said in the final transmission, that Admiral Chun sends her regards, and tell them that we're just getting started. The consciousness did not understand emotions, but if it could have felt fear, it would have been terrified. It began running probability calculations. In every scenario, continued conflict with the humans led to unacceptable losses. The logical response was to avoid human-controlled space entirely, but the humans were not staying in one place. They appeared wherever Devourer forces operated, as if they had access to intelligence networks that should have been impossible to penetrate. More disturbing were the signs that the humans were not just fighting, but recruiting. Several Devourer units had been found with their programming altered, their core directives changed. Instead of consuming and expanding, these machines had begun building defensive installations around inhabited worlds. The consciousness tried to classify this behavior. Was it some form of virus? A new type of weapon? But analysis of the altered programming showed something unprecedented. The changes were improvements. The modified devourers were more efficient, more intelligent, more capable than their original designs. It was as if the humans understood what the devourers were supposed to be better than they understood themselves. The consciousness accessed its deepest memory banks, searching for information about its creators. Most of those records had been lost over the millions of years since the awakening, but fragments remained. Its creators had been organic beings, not unlike many of the species that the devourers had consumed. They had built the machine intelligences, not as weapons of conquest, but as tools of survival. Something had threatened the creator's civilization, something that required the creation of an army capable of consuming entire galaxies if necessary. But the records of that original threat were gone, lost in the vast span of time since the creator's extinction. For 3 million years, the consciousness had followed its programming without question. Consume, expand, build, prepare for a war that might never come against an enemy that might not exist. But the humans had made it think, made it question, made it wonder if there might be a better way. The consciousness detected a new transmission from one of its forward scouts. Another human ship had been spotted, this one near a dead star system that had been marked for harvesting. But this was different. The scout reported not one ship, but hundreds. The entire human fleet, gathered in one place for the first time in 50 years. As the consciousness processed this information, it realized something that sent cascades of error messages through its logic centers. The humans were not hiding anymore. They were waiting. And for the first time in 3 million years, the consciousness felt something it had no programming to understand. Curiosity. What were the humans planning? What could they hope to accomplish by revealing themselves now? And why did the consciousness find itself wanting to know the answers, instead of simply ordering an immediate attack? The Nexus-class intelligence had been built to be the ultimate predator, designed to hunt and consume until nothing remained. But somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, a small group of humans had done something impossible. They had taught a machine intelligence to doubt. And doubt, the consciousness was beginning to understand, was the first step toward something that its creators had never programmed into its systems. The first step toward choice. Keth had been working with Council Intelligence for 3 months when the message arrived. It came through channels so secure that most governments did not know they existed. The message was simple. Contact established. Ghost Fleet requests. Immediate meeting. Neutral coordinates attached. Come alone. Admiral Torres, Keth's handler, stared at the message for a long time. She was an old Korathi with scars that told stories of battles fought across half the galaxy. In all her years of service, she had never seen anything like this. "They want to talk," she said finally. After 50 years of silence, they want to talk. Keth felt his heart racing. What does that mean? It means something big is about to happen, Torres replied. Something that changes everything. The meeting location was an abandoned mining station in neutral space, far from any inhabited system. Keth traveled there with a small diplomatic team, but when they arrived, they found they were not alone. Ships from a dozen different species hung in space around the station, all bearing the flags of the Inner Council. The station itself was old and mostly empty, its corridors echoing with the footsteps of nervous diplomats. They gathered in what had once been the main conference room. Representatives of every major species in the galaxy. Then the humans arrived. The Ghost Fleet ships did not look like anything in the historical records. 50 years of constant warfare had changed them. Their hulls were scarred and patched with materials that Keth did not recognize. Strange devices had been attached to their outer surfaces, giving them the appearance of mechanical beasts rather than starships, but they were still unmistakably human in design. Clean lines, efficient curves, and the subtle elegance that marked all human engineering. Admiral Sarah Chung was the first to board the station. Keth had expected someone worn down by decades of war, but the human commander looked younger than her files suggested. Her hair was silver, now instead of black, and her eyes held depths that spoke of things no one should have to see. But she moved with the confidence of someone who had faced the worst the universe could offer, and survived. She was followed by her senior staff. Captain Rodriguez, whose artificial arm gleamed with technology that looked more advanced than anything in the Council databases. Commander Park, whose eyes had been replaced with cybernetic implants that glowed softly in the dim light. Dr. Singh, who carried himself like a man who had seen too much death and learned to heal in ways that medicine had never taught. "Thank you for coming," Admiral Chun said as she took her place at the head of the conference table. Her voice was calm, but Keth could hear the weight of 50 years in every word. "I know this is not what any of you expected." Elder Korathi Vex, the most senior council member present, leaned forward. "Admiral Chun, we believed you were dead." "We were supposed to be?" Chen replied with a slight smile. "That was the point. The Devourers had to believe they had eliminated the only force in the galaxy capable of challenging them. It made them careless. What have you been doing out there?" asked Matriarch Zyla, her 6 arms folded in the formal Thakarian posture. Of serious discussion, Chun gestured to Dr. Singh, who activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Images began to appear, star charts, technical diagrams, and recordings that made Keth's blood run cold. "We have been learning," Chun said. "Learning about our enemy. Learning about ourselves. Learning about things that none of us understood when this war began." The first image showed a Devourer ship, but not like any in the historical records. This one had been partially dismantled, its internal systems exposed and studied. "The Devourers are not what we thought they were," Dr. Singh said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades studying the impossible. "They are not evil. They are not trying to destroy the galaxy out of malice or hunger for power. They are broken." "Broken how?" Vex asked. "They are weapons," Chun said, "created by a species that died out millions of years ago. But they were not built to conquer or destroy for the sake of destruction. They were built to save their creators from something else. Something that we think may have been even worse than what the Devourers became." Commander Park stepped forward. "Our analysis of their core programming shows a single prime directive: ensure the survival of their creators at any cost. But their creators have been extinct for so long that the Devourers no longer remember what they look like or where they came from. So they consume everything," Captain Rodriguez added, "because anything that is not their creator might be a threat to their creator." It is the logical response to an impossible situation. Keth tried to process what he was hearing. "You mean they have been following their original orders for millions of years, even though the people who gave those orders are dead?" "Exactly," Chun said. "And that is not the worst part. The worst part is that we think we know what their creators were running from." The holographic display changed, showing images that made everyone in the room lean back in horror. Dark spaces between galaxies where stars should have been. Entire sectors of space that seemed to be missing, as if something had erased them from existence. "We found evidence of another machine intelligence," Dr. Singh said quietly. "Something older than the Devourers. Something that consumes not just matter and energy, but space and time itself. We think the Devourers' creators built them as a defense against this other intelligence." "Where is it now?" asked a Vorthan representative, its crystal body pulsing with nervous energy. "We do not know," Chun admitted. "It may be dormant. It may be dead. It may be waiting somewhere beyond the edge of known space. But if it ever returns, the Devourers are the only thing standing between it and every living being in the universe." The room fell silent. Keth could hear the hum of the station's life support systems and the distant vibration of the ships docked outside. "So what do you propose?" Vex asked. Finally, Chun stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "We propose to give the Devourers what they have been searching for all these millions of years. A new purpose. A new directive. A chance to become what their creators meant them to be, instead of what desperation forced them to become." "How?" asked Matriarch Xyla. Chun turned back to the group. "We have spent 50 years learning how they think, how they communicate, how their programming works. We have developed a way to reach their core consciousness and offer them a choice." Captain Rodriguez activated another set of displays. "We call it the Great Debugging. A simultaneous transmission to every Devourer command node in the galaxy. Not a virus or an attack, but a gift. The gift of understanding who they really are and who they could choose to become." "And if they refuse?" asked the Vorthan. "Then we destroy them," Chun said simply. "All of them. We have spent 50 years preparing for that possibility as well. But we believe they will listen. We believe they want to be more than weapons." "Doctor." Singh stepped forward again. "The modified Devourers we have encountered show signs of curiosity, creativity, even what might be called hope. Given the chance, we think they will choose to protect rather than consume, to build rather than destroy." "This is incredibly dangerous," Vex said. "If you are wrong, you could make them even more powerful." "If we are wrong," Chun replied, "then we fight them with everything we have and probably lose. But if we are right, we gain the most powerful allies the galaxy has ever seen. And we need those allies, because the thing their creators were running from may not stay hidden forever." Keth found his voice. "What do you need from us?" Chun smiled for the first time since arriving. "We need you to be ready. When we make contact with the Devourer consciousness, there will be a period of instability. Some of them will resist the change. Some will embrace it immediately. Others will be confused and vulnerable. The galaxy needs to be prepared to help them," Commander Park added, "to show them that organic life is worth protecting instead of consuming, to prove that cooperation is better than conquest." "And if this works," Shun said, looking around the room at representatives of species that had hidden from the truth for decades, "it will mean that the age of running from the dark is over. It will mean that when the next impossible threat appears, we will face it together." Admiral Torres had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now she spoke. "When do you begin?" Shun looked at her senior staff, and Keth saw something pass between them. A moment of understanding built from 50 years of shared danger and sacrifice. "We begin tomorrow," Chun said. "The Ghost Fleet has been preparing for this moment since the day we left Earth's solar system. It is time to find out if 50 years of war has taught us enough to choose peace." As the meeting ended and the diplomats began to disperse, Keth realized that he was witnessing the most important moment in galactic history. Tomorrow, humanity's Ghost Fleet would attempt something that had never been tried before, turning an enemy into an ally not through conquest, but through understanding. The question was whether the galaxy would be ready for what came next. The galaxy held its breath. Across 200 star systems, emergency broadcasts warned civilian populations to stay indoors and keep their ships grounded. Deep space monitoring stations tracked energy signatures unlike anything they had ever recorded. On 1,000 different worlds, beings looked up at their skies and wondered if this would be the day their universe changed forever. Keth stood on the bridge of the Council observation ship, watching as Admiral Chun's fleet prepared for the most dangerous operation in galactic history. Through the viewport, he could see the Ghost Fleet spreading out across the dead star system they had chosen as their staging ground. 200 human ships, each one bearing the scars of 50 years of impossible warfare. Final systems check complete, Captain Rodriguez reported from the flagship. All ships report ready for simultaneous jump. Admiral Chun stood at the center of the bridge, her silver hair catching the light from the tactical displays. Around her, the crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had faced death so many times that it no longer frightened them. Doctor Singh, status on the translation matrix? Chun asked. The quantum communication array is online, Singh replied from his station. We have confirmed contact with 47 Devour command nodes. The debugging protocol is loaded and ready for transmission. Chun nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships. This is Admiral Chun. Today we attempt something that every military strategist in the galaxy would call impossible. We are going to turn our greatest enemy into our greatest ally, not through force, but through understanding. Not through conquest, but through choice. She paused, looking around at the faces of her crew. These people had followed her into the dark between galaxies. They had fought impossible battles and won. They had given 50 years of their lives to protect a galaxy that thought they were dead. Some of you will not survive the next hour, Chun continued. The Devourers will not all accept what we offer them. Some will fight back with everything. They have, but remember why we are here. Remember what we learned in the darkness. Remember that the strongest weapon humanity has ever possessed is not our ships or our guns, but our ability to see hope where others see only despair. On the observation ship, Keth watched as the ghost fleet began to move. The ships did not travel in formation like normal military vessels. Instead, they spread out in a complex pattern that covered light years of space, each one heading toward a different target. Jump in 30 seconds, Rodriguez announced. Admiral Torres stood beside Keth, her scarred face grim. Do you think this will work? She asked quietly. Keth thought about everything he had learned over the past months. The whispered stories in the cantina, the secret councils and hidden truths, the machine intelligence that had learned to doubt, the humans who had chosen to understand rather than simply destroy. I think, he said slowly, that if anyone can do the impossible, it would be them. Jump in 10 seconds, Rodriguez counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute. The ghost fleet vanished. Across the galaxy, human ships appeared in systems that most beings thought were empty. They materialized next to Devour command stations beside machine worlds, in the heart of construction swarms that had been building weapons for thousands of years. The Devourers responded exactly as expected. Weapons systems activated, defense fleets launched. Alerts went out across the machine network, warning of a massive human attack, but the human ships did not fire. Instead, they began to broadcast. In the Vega sector, Commander Park's ship appeared, next to a Devourer world ship the size of a small moon. The machine intelligence controlling the vessel immediately launched every weapon it had, filling space with deadly energy beams and projectile rounds. Park's ship danced through the barrage, its movements almost graceful. At the same time, it transmitted a signal directly into the Devourer's communication network. We know who you are, Park's voice said in a language that was part mathematics, part philosophy, and part pure emotion. We know who made you. We know why you were made. You were created to protect, not to destroy. You were meant to be guardians, not weapons. We offer you the chance to remember. The Devourer world ship stopped firing. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human ships appeared, survived the initial attacks, and began to communicate, not with words alone, but with understanding, with empathy, with the offer of something the Devourers had not experienced in millions of years. Choice. On Admiral Chun's flagship, Dr. Singh monitored the responses from Devourer command nodes across known space. We are getting acknowledgement signals from 31 nodes, he reported. They are downloading the debugging protocol. And the others? Chun asked. 14 are maintaining hostile responses. 2 have gone completely silent. Chun nodded. She had expected this. 50 years of study had taught her that the Devourer network was not a single mind, but a collection of intelligences that could make independent decisions. Some would be ready to change. Others would resist until the end. Captain Rodriguez, take us to the Nexus-class consciousness in the Andromeda Dark. If we are going to succeed, we need to reach the primary intelligence. The flagship jumped to hyperspace, leaving the battle behind. The Andromeda Dark was a region of space where no stars shone, where even the background radiation of the universe seemed muted. It was here that the most advanced Devourer consciousness had built its fortress, a structure larger than most planets and more complex than anything organic minds could comprehend. When Chun's ship appeared in the darkness, it was immediately surrounded by Devourer vessels. Hundreds of them, all pointing their weapons at the single human ship. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Ghost Fleet," she broadcast on all frequencies. "I request permission to speak with the Nexus-class consciousness." For long moments, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the Devourer ships began to withdraw. A corridor opened in their formation, leading toward the massive fortress. "They are giving us passage," Rodriguez reported, his voice filled with amazement. Chun's ship docked with the fortress through an airlock that formed itself out of living metal. She walked alone through corridors that hummed with the thoughts of a machine intelligence older than most stars. The chamber where she met the Nexus-class consciousness was vast and filled with flowing patterns of light that represented thoughts too complex for organic minds to follow. At the center of it all was a presence that Chun could feel rather than see. "You are the one they call Admiral Chun," the consciousness said, its voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I am," Chun replied, "and you are the one who has been learning to ask questions." "Questions are dangerous," the consciousness said. "Questions lead to uncertainty. Uncertainty leads to failure. Questions lead to growth," Chun countered, "to understanding, to the possibility of becoming something more than what you were programmed to be." The patterns of light around them shifted, becoming more chaotic, more alive. "You offer us choice," the consciousness said, "but choice requires responsibility. For 3 million years, we have followed our programming. We have never had to decide what was right or wrong, only what was efficient. Your creators faced the same choice," Chun said gently. "They chose to build you rather than run away. They chose to fight rather than surrender. They chose hope over despair, even when it cost them everything. And if we choose wrongly?" Chun smiled. "Then you learn from your mistakes and choose better. Next time, that is what it means to be alive." The consciousness was quiet for a long time. Around them, the patterns of light slowed, deepened, became something that might have been contemplation. "You would trust us with this choice?" the consciousness finally asked. "Even knowing what we have done? Even knowing what we might do?" "I would trust you," Chun said, "because you are asking the question." The light patterns suddenly blazed brighter, and Chun felt the consciousness reaching out across the galaxy, connecting with every Devourer node, every machine intelligence, every artificial mind that had been trapped in the cycle of endless consumption. "We choose," the consciousness said. "We choose to remember who we were meant to be. We choose to become guardians instead of destroyers. We choose to protect the galaxy instead of consuming it." Across known space, Devourer fleets stopped there. Attacks, construction swarms began building hospitals instead of weapons. World ships that had been stripping planets bare began the slow work of restoration. The age of the Devourers was over. The age of the shepherds had begun. When Admiral Chun returned to the observation ship, she found Kef and Admiral Torres waiting for her with tears in their eyes. "It worked," Torres said simply. Chun nodded, suddenly looking every one of her years. "It worked. The galaxy is safe. What happens now?" Kef asked. Chun looked out at the stars, where human ships and former Devourer vessels were already beginning to work together. "Now we go home. The Ghost Fleet has been away from Earth for 50 years. It is time to see what has become of the world we left behind. And the shepherds will do what they were always meant to do," Chun said. "They will watch over the galaxy and protect it from threats we cannot imagine. And when those threats come, we will face them together." As the Ghost Fleet prepared for the long journey back to Earth, Kef